This webcast will provide a brief overview of the Ontario Human Rights Commission Inquiry Report on the Right to Read. My name is Aiseta Conte, and I am an EDFO member. Let's delve into what the Ontario Human Rights Commission says about every child's right to read and how teacher professional judgment is essential to student learning. First, let me start by providing a brief background that led up to the Ontario Human Rights Commission inquiry. Jeffrey Moore, a child with a severe learning disability, claimed that he was discriminated against because the intense remedial instruction he needed in his early years learning for his dyslexia was not available in the public school system. This case concerns the fundamental right to his educational needs being met at school. On November 9, 2012, the Supreme Court of Canada released a unanimous decision, Moore versus British Columbia, recognizing that learning to read is not a privilege, but a fundamental and essential human right. The Supreme Court found that Jeffrey Moore, a student with dyslexia, had the right to receive the intensive supports and interventions that he needed to learn to read from the school board. EDFO has long advocated for increased funding in our schools, and in particular, special education. Most students who have issues with reading comprehension have word-level reading difficulties. Reading achievement for Ontario students is concerning, but the outcome for students with special education needs, excluding gifted, learning disabilities, boys, Black and other racialized students, multilingual students, students from low-income backgrounds, and Indigenous students are even more troubling. Dyslexia is the most common learning disability, and learning disabilities are the most prevalent special educational exceptionality in Ontario. This means that dyslexia, reading disabilities, are the most prevalent disabilities in schools. There are students with dyslexia, reading disabilities in every Ontario classroom. Many students' reading difficulties are inevitable. This will require additional stable, enveloped yearly funding and implementation support from the ministry and adequate professional development and support to make sure there are knowledgeable and skilled educators who can deliver these interventions. And the last, nearly all students can learn to read words proficiently with science-based, systematic, and explicit instruction in foundational reading skills. Over the next 5 minutes, we will look at the recommendations that we, as teachers in the schools, have some control over to support students learning to read. The report also acknowledges that there are systemic barriers for many students and states that having strong early reading skills is not enough to overcome this disadvantage. However, the disadvantage deepens when they experience barriers and fail to learn this basic skill. On February 28, 2022, the Ontario Human Rights Commission released the Right to Read Inquiry Report with 157 recommendations emphasizing the fact that learning to read is a human right in Canada. It was the first of its kind in Canada. The full report is 558 pages and can be accessed on the Ontario Human Rights Commission website. The recommendations include changes that would impact all students in Ontario schools. I think the movement and priority towards providing teachers with the necessary teaching tools grounded in research is happening at different paces across Ontario. How might we continue to come together as educators, teachers, educational assistants, speech and language pathologists, administrators, and build learning around evidence-based practices? The inquiry is about every child's right to a successful future. The research methodology that the Ontario Human Rights Commission used can be found on their website. The inquiry report made recommendations in the following 6 areas: curriculum and instruction, early screening, reading interventions, accommodations, professional assessments, and systemic issues. I'm going to provide an overview of some of the recommendations that the inquiry report makes. The inquiry report makes recommendations about curriculum instruction, 3-tiered approaches in order to maximize outcomes for all students. Tier 1 is high-quality, whole-class curriculum that is research-based. 5 big ideas in early reading: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. The report repeatedly emphasizes explicit and systematic instruction using a research-based program. removing the queuing systems. And lastly, students need to be able to decode words with automaticity and efficiency to aid in overall comprehension. The inquiry makes recommendations about early screening. Screen all students twice per year, kindergarten to grade 2, by providing various options using standardized, evidence-based screeners, which better ensure early identification and intervention on foundational skills. Early years are a critical window for teaching foundational word reading skills. Age 4 to 7 is a critical window of opportunity for teaching children foundational word reading skills and when intervention will be the most effective. Please note that at the time of this recording, the Ministry of Education issued a clarification memo on August 25, 2023, entitled Application of Early Reading Screening Components of PPM 168 for the 2023-24 school year. This memo confirms that the early reading screening elements of PPM 168 will not be required. Teachers may choose to administer those components on a voluntary basis until September 1st, 2024. Educators will continue to use their professional judgment in the implementation of early reading screeners and diagnostic assessments to make informed decisions for instructional next steps that best meet the needs of each student. The inquiry report also makes recommendations about reading interventions. The goal is to decrease reading interventions by strengthening Tier 1 instruction using explicit and systematic instruction. The Right to Read report references several reading researchers who remind us about the importance of early intervention. We can no longer adopt a wait-and-see approach, but we must respond to assessment data promptly. The report states, when reading interventions are early, evidence-based, fully implemented, and closely monitored, they are highly effective in reducing reading failure. Students in all grades, from kindergarten to high school, should have access to effective interventions for reading difficulties. With effective classroom instruction and early interventions, fewer students will need interventions in the older grades, where they are more time-consuming and can be less effective. The inquiry report makes recommendations about accommodations and modifications. A structured literacy approach is beneficial for all and necessary for some students in our learning spaces. As Growing Success outlines, it's important to keep in mind the differences between accommodations and modifications. Accommodations are special teaching and assessment strategies, human supports, and/or individualized equipment required to enable a student to learn and to demonstrate their learning. The provincial curriculum expectations for the grade are not altered for a student receiving accommodations, versus modifications, which are changes made to the age-appropriate grade-level expectations for a subject or course in order to meet a student's learning needs. The inquiry report also makes recommendations about the need for more supports. For example, the need for sufficient, stable, enveloped yearly funding and implementation support that includes job-embedded, comprehensive, ongoing professional development for educators and access to professionals. In summary, as a staunch defender of our publicly funded education system, EDFO recognizes every student's right to read and has called for a fully funded response to the Ontario Human Rights Commission's Right to Read inquiry report. EDFO also recognizes that students from groups protected under the Ontario Human Rights Code are disproportionately impacted, leading to difficulties accessing their right to read. EDFO's concern, however, is that the Ford government is arbitrarily selecting recommendations from the report. They are focusing on recommendations that require the least amount of investment and are creating a false sense of accountability in responding to the report. As EDFO members, we are educators who work diligently to ensure that every student learns to read accurately, fluently, and with enjoyment.